Hello and welcome back to another episode of On the Grid Podcast. We are back for our 2024 grid predictions for the Formula One teams. So we'll go team by team and give our predictions for who we think will be where. So if we do this in reverse championship order, so we'll start off with AlphaTauri and give our two drivers who we think will be racing there. So I'll kick things off with, I think, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. So the current pairing will be there again next season. I don't think this is too much of a controversial one, but do you want to give me your predictions?
Yes, I've actually gone quite different to you. I've also gone with Yuki Tsunoda, but in the second driver's seat, I've gone with Ayumu Iwasa.
Interesting.
And I'll give you the reasoning why for Ayumu Iwasa. I just feel that Daniel Ricciardo will be making the step up to a certain team next year. And I think Ayumu Iwasa, I think he's been consistent in Formula 2, and I think he deserves the upgrade, the development the Red Bull Academy giving him, and I think he deserves the seat at AlphaTauri and to be given the chance in Formula One. Obviously, there's talks of Liam Lawson potentially going to the team and other Red Bull Academy drivers, but I think Ayumu Iwasa, with him being an F2, I think it's logical him making the step up to Formula One. I think Liam Lawson's chance has gone. I think Liam Lawson is still the test driver for the team, if I'm not mistaken. It might be him or it might be Ayumu. It's a couple of the Red Bull Academy guys. But yeah, for me, Ayumu Iwasa, purely on the basis that it seems logical for him to make the step up from Formula 2 to Formula 1. But then again, if Daniel Ricciardo stays, I reckon Ayumu Iwasa will still be in the wings for 2025. So I've gone Iwasa for 2024, but I wouldn't be too surprised if Ricciardo stays for 2024. That's just me. That's just my prediction and my gut feeling about 2024 AlphaTauri.
Wow, that is very interesting. Here was me thinking it would have a nice little easy intro into the video, and you've come out with that bombshell. I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. You know, I'm by in no way, shape, or form a Red Bull fan, but you know, to see Daniel Ricciardo in a top car once again would be fantastic to see him fighting for podiums and race wins. And who know, he may get that world title. We can only hope. But yeah, I can see Iwasa joining AlphaTauri if that does happen. However, I think the only thing that may stand against him is either one, Daniel Ricciardo staying, and two, the politics of it all. You know, with it, because he's a Japanese driver, with Honda's influence on Red Bull fading, they may go for someone else. They may go for a Liam Lawson. So you know, who knows? We'll have to wait and see on that one. Moving on now to Alfa Romeo. So there's talk that Guan Yu Zhou will retain his seat. So I've gone with Guan Yu Zhou. There's talks of him having a contract extension of either 2 or 3 years, is what's being rumoured at this point in time. Lining up alongside him, I've gone Teo Pourchaire.
So
I
am
think
I.
this is going to happen. I think, you know, Teo's in a championship fight in F2. And, you know, either way, whether he wins that or not, I think if he wins it, it just further stakes that claim. But even if he comes second and gets beaten by Vesti, then there is still that he is still a quality driver. There's arguments he could have made that step up this year, but he had another year in F2, and I think this is his moment to really step up into F1, and I think it'll be at Alfa Romeo, given those Ferrari links that are, you know, ending shortly, but are still there for the time being.
Also to add on your point about Teo Pourchaire, I think this season is the season where he needs to win the F2 championship. Obviously, last year, he was in a championship battle with Felipe Drugovich and he lost out. And he didn't make the step up. So I think this year, if he does win the F2 championship, he will make that step up. Teo Pourchaire, a Sauber Academy product. He's obviously it's the most logical way of him being integrated with the team. With Alfa Romeo's links obviously fading away with the Sauber team, I think it's logical for Teo to move into what will be the Sauber team in 2024. So it's only logical. Teo moves up, and I've also gone with Guan Yu Zhou staying at the team. I think Valtteri Bottas will be the one leaving the team, which is a bit of a sad ending if he does leave the team. But then again, I don't think Valtteri Bottas will mind too much. He'll be off to do a bit of cycling, etc., and enjoying his pastime with whatever entails or occurs to him next. So for me, Alfa Romeo will consist of Teo Pourchaire and Guan Yu Zhou.
There we go. Our first agreement on the team. Moving on to Haas. So, do you want to give me your two drivers to line up for Haas next season?
So for Haas, I've gone with boringness. I've gone with Nico Hulkenberg and I've gone with Kevin Magnussen. I think the two are simply going to stay put. Nico Hulkenberg doing a great job of the team so far. Kevin Magnussen hasn't been pulling his weight, but I think Gunther Steiner is a big fan of Kevin Magnussen, and for the sprinkle of joy that he sometimes brings to the team, I think it's worth for the two to stay at the team. So I've gone with Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg, both to stay put at Haas.
I've half agreed with you. I've gone with Nico Hulkenberg to stay. I don't think that's in doubt. I think he's going to stay for a couple more years until he eventually decides to retire. However, to line up alongside him, I've gone for Frederick Vesti. I think it might be a little bit controversial because I know he's got those Mercedes links, but I think, maybe Mercedes and Haas can work out a deal. If he is fighting for the F2 championship, he's been in sensational form in F2. I think he could get that step up, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in Haas if, Gunther Steiner's had enough of Magnussen not perform to the level they expect. But equally, I can see them just going with the same two drivers again because they tried the young driver thing and it didn't work for them. But I've gone this time, and I think they'll go to Vesti. So moving on then to Williams. Do you want to give me your two drivers to line up for Williams next season?
I've also gone boring. I've gone with Alex Albon and Logan Sargent. I don't see that team changing a hell of a lot. Alex Albon, consistent performer for Williams, and I think he's the number one in that team no matter what. Putting that team on his back, and he's been carrying them so far this season in 2023. And Logan Sargent, yes, he's a rookie, but I think Williams will allow him one more season to kind of show the Williams team what Logan Sargent is all about and whether he can score points. Whether he gets binned off at the start, midway through 2024, like Nick De Vries has this season in 2023, I don't know. But I think that Logan Sargent has kind of been able to crawl up the pecking order a little bit and been consistent somewhat in the last few rounds of the first half of the season in 2023. So Logan Sargent and Alex Albon for me at Williams.
I have not gone for the same. So I've gone for Alex Albon. I think he'll stay there. I think it's a good fit. It works for all parties. Alex Albon seems to be enjoying his time at Williams. Williams get a fantastic driver who is delivering them points and helping them up the constructors table. I don't think that Logan Sargent will stay at Williams. I think he will be out of F1, and I think to replace him will be Mick Schumacher. They have the Mercedes link there with James Vowles at the team, and obviously Schumacher is the third driver for Mercedes. He's looking for a way back into the sport, and I can see that'll be a very good fit. And I think it'll be a good environment for him to, be given a little bit more freedom and a little bit more time than he was afforded at Haas, an extra season, to really show what he can do. Because I don't think Mick Schumacher's time in Formula One is over yet. I think he'll be back in the sport, if not next year, then the year after. But yeah, I think I can see that happening with James Vowles. However, I will say that if it does happen, it will be something that's decided after Abu Dhabi. I would have thought. I think this is going to be something that's decided right at the end of the season, and it's not going to be announced within the next month. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a big shock, you know. I wasn't expecting you to throw Mick Schumacher's name into the mix. Of course, he had that stint at Haas, which didn't work out in the end, and he got binned off. And obviously, he's now Mercedes' third driver. But I wouldn't be opposed to Mick Schumacher returning to Formula One. But I do think that James Vowles and Williams will give Logan Sargent at least another season. If okay, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say this. If Logan Sargent does not get at least a point this season, we may see a driver swap between him and Mick Schumacher potentially. But if he does score a couple of points this season, I don't think he's going to be replaced. That's just my opinion. I think Alex Albon and Logan Sargent will stay, but I wouldn't be opposed to Mick Schumacher returning to the sport.
And now moving on to Alpine. Sorry, I had left my microphone on mute then. I've gone boring. I think Ocon and Gasly will stay at Alpine. I don't see this changing, to be honest. They're both on long contracts, I believe. Alpine need to make a step forward. They've got two very good drivers. Two French drivers at a French team who are highly rated on the grid, and now they need to give them the machinery to do that. Otherwise, in a year or two's time, if we're sat here in 12 months' time and there's been no improvement, I think one of if not both of those will get a bit restless and want to be in a car where they're able to fight for points and a good points as well, not just your ninth and 10th place, maybe sort of sixth and sevenths, but which they're more than capable of doing, as they've shown. But yeah, for next season, I don't see anything changing. Ocon and Gasly at Alpine for me.
Similarly for me, Ocon and Gasly, I don't see any changes being made at the French outfit. Two French drivers at a French team have it seemed to be working fairly well so far this season in 2023. But I think that car needs to make some step forwards to be challenging further up the field because it is slowly falling behind the likes of McLaren, Aston Martin, and obviously the top three in Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari, the top three teams, not the top three quickest teams per se. So yeah, for me, Gasly and Ocon, it just makes sense. Steps need to be made forward. However, if they are to stay in 2025 and 2026 and beyond that, but for 2024, I think it's staying the same. Ocon and Gasly, two Frenchmen in a French team, continue to build forward.
And moving on to McLaren, do you want to give me your driver predictions for McLaren for next season?
Yeah, it's the same once again. It's Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. I think in the last three races, or the last couple or so races in the first half of the season in 2023, have kind of shown that McLaren are competitive at the front of the field. So I think that's persuaded Lando Norris to stay put for another year. And Oscar Piastri, the rookie, I don't think he'll be wanting to jump ship right now. I think he's in a very good place with McLaren, and I don't think that Zach Brown would be wanting to lose both of his drivers, or even one of them. I think he wants to keep Lando Norris wrapped up in cotton wool and locked up somewhere and not going anywhere because he's staying for 2024 for me. So Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, the pair at McLaren.
Yeah, again, completely agree. Maybe a little bit boring, but yeah, no, I can't see this changing. Same with next one, Ferrari. Again, I know Carlos Sainz's contract is up at the end of the season, but I don't think that will change. The two Ferrari drivers have been at a very similar level, as we spoke about in the last podcast, which was our 1 to 21 driver ratings. Maybe Charles has had a few more of the exceptional performances, the standout moments, so those podiums thus far. However, he's not been as consistent as Sainz, as we also discussed. So yeah, I'm going to go boring. I'm going to say Ferrari to remain unchanged, as well as McLaren for next season.
And similarly for my boys in red, they will be unchanged. Carlos and Charles, I think, is a good partnership. There's a good camaraderie there in the team as well. I think they complement each other very well. It's not the Carl Lando bromance that happened at McLaren, but Charles and Carlos are a good fit together, and I don't think they'll be separated. I know there was talks of Charles potentially moving to Mercedes if Lewis Hamilton retired this year, and linked with Carlos Sainz obviously potentially going to Red Bull or McLaren or Aston Martin, etc. But I don't see the two guys that are currently in red for at the Prancing Horses moving anywhere else. I think their partnership will stay intact, and I think another season at the Prancing Horses for them, potentially with a title battle on their hands, depending on how the 2024 car is progressing so far. It might be on the cards. Ferrari fans are hopeful. I'm not going to be hopeful. I'm going to stay very level-headed. I think I got too ahead of myself, ahead of 2023, and was thinking, yeah, title charge on, but it's clearly faded away. So yeah, for me, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc seems logical for them to stick as a pairing, and I think they will stay as a pairing in 2024.
Yeah, couldn't have put it better myself. The exact same reasons for me. Now moving on to Aston Martin. Now, in an ideal world, my driver lineup for this one would be Alonso and Sebastian Vettel coming out of retirement. However, I don't see that happening. I think, um, the owner's son will stay there for another year, despite costing them potentially millions of pounds in prize money. When Aston Martin finished fifth in the Constructors' Championship, as I think they'll do, which will solely be due to Lance Stroll's poor performances. And, if you had two top drivers, such as Alonso and Vettel, then you would see, Aston Martin will be very far clear of Mercedes this year. Even if the car fell off towards the end of the season, I think they'll still be at least be able to finish third in the constructors overall. But with Lance Stroll there, I don't see that happening. But that being said, I think that the same driver lineup will be there next year. I think Alonso and Stroll will be at the team next season.
Okay, I've gone controversial and I've put my neck on the line. Fernando Alonso obviously signed that multi-year contract, and for me, in 2024, he stays at Aston Martin. But I see Aston Martin binning off Lance Stroll. I really do. I think I've even seen an article where Lance Stroll has gone on record saying that he's never wanted to race in Formula One, and he's wanting to leave, etc. So on that judgment, I'm going to go and put my neck on the line, seeing another rookie jump into the sport in Felipe Drugovich, the reserve driver at Aston Martin. He didn't get his chance this season purely on the basis of Lance Stroll being in that second driver role. And I think that Felipe Drugovich will get his chance in 2024. Obviously, the 2022 F2 World Champion did a fantastic job to secure that championship title ahead of Théo Pourchaire. And I think he deserves his chance in the sport, because I don't think he deserves to be waiting in the wings as long as Nick De Vries did. Nick De Vries waited a little too long, jumped into Formula E, won the championship there, then jumped into Formula One, and we saw what happened after 10 races in 2023. So for me, if Felipe Drugovich has this year out and is doing as much simulator work as possible for Aston Martin, happy days. But I think this is the year where Felipe has to step up, otherwise his chances in Formula One may be over. So for me, 2024 Aston Martin driver pairing, Fernando Alonso and Felipe Drugovich.
Very interesting. I didn't consider Drugovich. Yeah, I forgot he was still at Aston Martin as a reserve driver. What are your predictions for Mercedes next season?
The same. Lewis Hamilton, George Russell. I don't think there needs to be a lot said there. Two Brits for the team. Like I say, Lewis Hamilton, I think, will give it another crack. I sounded really posh then. He'll give it a crack once again in 2024, and George Russell once again. He's not been as good as he was in 2022. It's not the 2022 George Russell that we've got this season. But in 2024, I think he'll give it his all. And I think he'll challenge Lewis Hamilton all the way. I think George Russell is kind of a bit shocked of the consistency levels of Lewis Hamilton so far this campaign. But in 2024, I expect a different Mercedes beast. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, I think they'll be guns blazing. And I think if they get the car right, they could be challenging Red Bull at the top once again. So for me, Mercedes, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, no changes from 2023. The driver pairing will stay put at Mercedes.
Very interesting. Yeah, I don't think that's going to change either. Yeah, it'll be the same driver lineup next year as well. What I will say though is I think Lewis Hamilton has at least another couple of years left in him. He looks like he's enjoying racing again. In Formula One, sort of taking a step back from fighting for the win every race, and the pressure cooker that cooks up, and sort of taking that step back, fighting for these podiums, for these good results. And he looks rejuvenated, I think. He's even admitted himself, if he was still fighting at the front, he would be seriously considering his retirement, but he doesn't look like he is. He doesn't sound like he is. And I think he's got at least 2 or 3 more years left in him, and it's fantastic to see. So yeah, I think same driver lineup for Mercedes next year. And then to round things off, so I'll go first because I think I know what's coming. I've gone for the same driver lineup at Red Bull. I think, though, this will be a make or break season for Sergio Perez, and I think it will be break next year. I don't see him staying with Red Bull beyond next year, possibly beyond this year, but I've played it a little bit safer. Obviously, Max Verstappen is going to stay there as long as he wants. There's talk about him leaving when his contract is up. Wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see him retire from Formula One early. However, I think that for next season at least, Red Bull will stick with that same driver lineup, which would have won them by that point 2 back-to-back constructors titles.
The honey badger is back at Red Bull for me. I don't think I need to explain myself a lot. I think this season has kind of shown the woes of Sergio Perez compared to Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen not off the podium at all this season, and Sergio Perez just very, very inconsistent. That may be said a hell of a lot this season. But I generally do think that Daniel Ricciardo will get the chance back at Red Bull Racing in the top team and not in the sister team of AlphaTauri. I think that Sergio Perez's time at Red Bull is up. I think it was just a matter of time that Christian Horner rung Daniel Ricciardo up once again to get him to join Red Bull. And he was waiting for Daniel to answer that call and to come back to the Red Bull team to kind of step up into the second driver role alongside Max Verstappen. It's obviously going to be it's going to be weird for Daniel Ricciardo being the number 2 behind a less experienced teammate. But I think Daniel Ricciardo will thrive in that role, and I think he'll be the driver that pushes Verstappen. I think the number 2 role at Red Bull curse breaks on Daniel Ricciardo, and I think he'll be the driver that pushes Max Verstappen a hell of a lot. And I think those two may be in a championship battle in 2024 alongside Mercedes and Ferrari, potentially, if those two teams deliver the packages that are needed to challenge at the top. So for me, Daniel Ricciardo, number 2 at Red Bull, number 1, Max Verstappen.
And that rounds it up. So that's very interesting. Can we see Daniel Ricciardo back in the Red Bull next season? We'll have to wait and see and review these once the entire 20-man grid is confirmed for next year. But in the meantime, thank you all for listening. That is everything for this podcast. And we will see you in the next episode. And we hope you continue to enjoy the content during this summer break, which seems like it's never ending.